Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. Visionary though he was, not even Samuel Taylor Coleridge could have foreseen the calamity facing Britain's 21st century water industry when he wrote the famous line from the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. But he could have been queuing up the startling report from the Public Accounts Committee this week. They tell us that we currently use 14 billion litres of water a day. The National Audit Office predicts that by the year 2050, Britain will find itself 5 billion litres short of usable water each and every day. The Labour titan, Aneurin Bevan, once remarked that on an island made of coal and surrounded by fish, it would take an organising genius to engineer a shortage of both. How is it possible that in a country with a worldwide reputation for being persistently rainy, we can find ourselves without enough fresh water? Well, it's politics, of course. Governments of every stamp tend to spend taxes on stuff that the electorate can see and be grateful for, rather than on fixing our hidden, crumbling 19th century infrastructure. But sooner or later, someone pays the price. We've been here before. Back in 1858, the discharge of raw sewage, dead animals and rubbish had so polluted the Thames that the stench drove MPs out of the riverside rooms of Parliament. The Great Stink, as they called it, led to a vast programme of renewal of the London sewers, led by the great engineer Sir Joseph Bazalgette. Well, it looks as though the bill for neglect since then is about to be presented to us. Someone, somewhere, is somehow going to have to hold their noses and pay up. We'll try to find out who this morning. Well, let's start with the government. A little earlier, I spoke to the Environment Secretary. Steve Reed, it's your ambition to reduce sewage spills by half by 2030. That's a pretty low bar to aim for, isn't it? We only swim in sewage Monday to Wednesday.
It's actually the most ambitious target any government has ever had to reduce sewage pollution. And the reason it's important is because our water sector is absolutely broken. In the general election just a year ago, people were furious that we were seeing record levels of sewage pollution in our rivers and our lakes and our seas, and they voted for change. Well, that change is now coming. This government has put in place 3 building blocks that will lead to that change. The first one is we've reset the system, banning unfair bonuses, multi-million-pound bonuses that the water bosses were paying themselves for overseeing this catastrophic failure, and introducing new prison sentences for polluting water bosses who break the law. The second stage is to rebuild our broken water system. So we've got crumbling sewage pipes, broken and leaking water pipes. We've secured £104 billion of private sector investment, the biggest ever investment in our water sector, that will allow us to rebuild that whole system. But the third building block is the water revolution. We need to reform this sector from top to bottom so that the failure of the past can never happen again. And it's because we put those 3 building blocks in place that I'm now able to say to the British public that this government will cut sewage pollution from the water companies in half within 5 years.
All right, let's unpack some of that. Let's just start with the situation. I understand the ambition is to cut by half, but let's just talk about where we are now. Let's look at yesterday's map. This is midday yesterday, and what this map is showing is the hundreds, actually, of discharges. Just as a person, this is pretty shameful for a modern nation, isn't it?
It's an absolute disgrace. It's a scandal that we're in a position, one of the most advanced nations on the planet, and yet we cannot keep our rivers and our lakes and our seas free of the kind of pollution that we're seeing now, filthying so much of it. And I think it became a metaphor under the previous government, actually, for so much that had gone wrong. The rivers that we used to be able to go in as kids, you couldn't now let your children or grandchildren go in. That is why we've taken these steps, put in place these building blocks, so we can completely reform this system from top to bottom.
I'm going to come to that.
Clean up our rivers, lakes and seas.
I'm going to come to that, but I still want to ask you about your ambition. You want to reduce that awful picture by half. It really isn't that ambitious, isn't
No,
it?
Trevor,
Except by comparison with a century and a half of neglect.
Well, up until the election, every year sewage pollution was getting worse and worse and worse. We've turned a corner now. I put in place those building blocks. We've secured £104 billion, the biggest ever investment in our water sector, that we can start to spend.
And after £100 billion, we're still going to be swimming in sewage.
Well, do you know what? I was at an event last week, a skills summit, where we were looking at how we can develop and train people to carry out the 40,000 new jobs that this will create. That isn't the end of our ambition. Over a decade of national renewal, we will be able to eliminate unauthorised sewage spillages. But you have to have staging posts along the way. Cutting it in half in 5 years is a dramatic improvement to the problem getting worse and worse and worse every single year.
This is interesting. Now, this is more interesting. What you're saying, if I heard you correctly, is that you want to get rid of all sewage in the next 10 years. That's the ambition.
Well, the Prime Minister in the general election campaign was talking about a decade of national renewal. We're not going to be able to do absolutely everything in 5 years. £104 billion is more money. £104 billion is more money than we've ever spent in the water sector. It cuts it in half, but of course we then want to go on to eliminate unauthorised sewage spills so we can restore our rivers, lakes and seas to the purity that we knew when we were younger.
Let's talk about where you're going to get all the money from. Can I just start with one of the ideas that seems to have been floated today? Are you open to the idea of charging more to affluent families in order to take the edge off for less well-off families?
Well, if you're talking about social tariffs, the water companies already have social tariffs, and they increased them last year when the bills went up to pay for the failure to maintain under the previous government.
Would you encourage them to do more of that?
Those already exist. I'm not sure whether they need to do more. You know, I understand that Sir John Cunliffe will be presenting his report tomorrow. Of course, he may make recommendations on that. We have to look at what he's going to say.
You wouldn't be against the cross-subsidy. I mean, Labour's about redistribution, isn't it?
Well, they already exist. There's already a scheme in place.
I'm asking if you would encourage more. Because we know from Ofwat that 20% of families struggle to pay their bills.
I'd need to be convinced that we need to do more, but there are already schemes in place to support the poorer families who would otherwise struggle to pay their bills. I've not been convinced yet that there needs to be even more of that. My interest is, particularly having seen the bill rises that we had last year. That was the result of years of failure to maintain the system properly, to invest in it. With the changes we're making, there will be much better maintenance ongoing. That means that we can protect families from those massive bill hikes in future. My interest is that.
I get that.
I don't think people should have to pay through the nose for something just because the water companies and the regulator let it get into such an appalling state.
When you say you want to protect families from massive bill rises in future, are you going to promise to limit increases in bills to inflation?
Well, there's a process and the regulator will be overseeing how that works. But what we can
But you can set the regulator an ambition. You can tell the regulator this is what you need to do.
What happened previously was the previous government allowed water companies to get away with underinvestment in our sewage and water system. That means the pipes crumbled, and anyone that owns a home will know if you see a crack in the wall and you leave it for 10 years, it gets far worse and it costs you more to fix it. That's where we were. That's why we got the big hike in bills. The new system that we're looking at will make sure that with adequate investment, 104 billion we've got going in, that kind of problem won't recur. We won't see those big bill rises again.
Let me stop you there. Previous government made the regulator focus on keeping bills down. That is why the water companies will say that they didn't have enough leeway to invest. So what are you going to do? Are you going to say to the regulator, your job continues to be to keep prices down, preferably below the rate of inflation? Or are you going to say, reality strikes, we are going to have to charge more so that we make sure that, by the way, after your £100 billion investment, the water companies say they're going to need another 180, 190 billion over the next 10 years to fix the system. Next 20 years, I beg pardon, to fix the system.
Bills need to be as low as possible. There were companies under the previous, under the current regulatory system that were committing to spend certain amounts of money upgrading their pipes, but then they didn't upgrade them. Yet they found the money to pay bonuses and dividends. Now, that should never have been allowed to happen. If that money had been invested where it should have been invested,
I know the
then
bonus and
customers
dividend
wouldn't have
thing.
got the bill hikes.
I know the bonus.
We
The
need
bonus and dividend thing is nice politically, but let's just halt here. This is to pension funds. It's not to fat capitalists. It's the pension funds who own most of these water companies. So let's put that to one side.
Ownership, but whoever owns it, they shouldn't get away with failing to upgrade the pipes when they've said they will upgrade the pipes and have been given a bill rise to allow them to upgrade the pipes. They got away with murder, and they're not going to be doing that with this government.
My point is, you can deflect us with getting at the rich, what's supposedly rich people, but the real choice for government is, do you allow prices to rise and provide money for investment, or do you say, let's keep the prices down now and starve the companies of investment?
You need appropriate levels of investment, and you need appropriate bill rises.
What does that mean? Does that mean inflation or not?
Well, a small, steady increase in bills is what people expect. That's what happens in most bills that I pay.
That's not what took place this year, so no more of that.
No, it was an outrage this year, and I'm furious about it.
Okay.
It happened because the companies did not invest the money they said they would invest in upgrading the water pipes, and the poor old bill payer has had to collar the lot for that. We won't let that happen again. I'm going to revolutionise this system so the failures of the past do not happen again in the future.
Is part of the revolution getting rid of the current regulator? Ofwat?
Well, I've asked Sir John Cunliffe to complete a report, and he's going to tell us tomorrow what his recommendation is. So, like you, we're all on tenterhooks to see what he's going to recommend. I will then respond to what he says.
Let's be grown up here. You know what you're going to do, and I know you're not going to tell me what's in Cunliffe's report, but would you be surprised, disappointed, angry if he said, get rid of Ofwat?
We've had his interim report, so we know that he agrees with the conclusion of, I guess, most of your viewers and me. This system is broken and regulation has failed.
So you would
exactly what we we do to fix regulation.
So you would accept.
I genuinely asked Sir John to come up with his own
if he's recommended, you'd be minded to accept that regulation, the abolition of Ofwat.
Well, let's see what he's got to say. I mean, he's not going to just come in with one recommendation. It's something like a 400-page report. There's going to be a lot in there, and I guess it's not going to be very, very simple in many respects. But we'll find out tomorrow. As I said to you right at the beginning of this interview, we've got building blocks in place to turn this system upside down because it's let down everyone, customers, the environment, and investors. We're going to reset it from top to bottom so the water sector of the future will be a success story for this country.
All right, look, the issue that you have to deal with isn't just about cleanliness of the water. It's also how we manage these utilities to support economic growth. One of the issues that is emerging is the building of homes can be constrained by the unavailability of water resources. Do you have any idea how many homes are not being built because of water constraints?
Not the exact number, but you pointed to an extremely important problem. I'm aware that development, house building around Cambridge was held back by a lack of clean water, around Oxford in Oxfordshire from a lack of sewerage systems. We need a system that allows us to put in place the water infrastructure for new homes to go ahead. It's not just new homes, it's also business. If we want the data centres and the gigafactories, which are the economy of the future, they use a vast amount of water. And if we can't plan for those new factories and places of employment without having in place the water infrastructure to allow them to operate. So that vast amount of money, the 104 billion that we're bringing in, a large part of that will go to upgrading water infrastructure so that economic development.
But it only gets spent. It only gets spent if the planning regime allows it. Do you think that economic growth is being restrained at the moment because of the absence of a net water?
I don't have an absolute figure, but I think it will have cost the economy tens of billions of pounds. The fact that our water infrastructure is in such a poor state, and the fact that we are not aligning water infrastructure investments with spatial planning being where the factories go, where the homes go. Those two things need to be aligned far better. So part of the revolution that we'll be looking at is how do we ensure that alignment? The Chancellor is very interested in getting this right as well. It's one of the issues she and I discuss the most when we sit down and talk, how we can make water work for the economy.
There's one other element that's in your territory. Deputy Prime Minister sat in that chair and she said she'd never allow anything to stand in the way of building the 1.5 million homes she's promised us. Yet you're going to amend her planning reforms to give Natural England a veto, effectively, over development if it thinks that the plans might affect fragile or rare habitats. Does that mean that we're going to have £100 million bat tunnels all over again?
We're absolutely not going to be having that anymore. What a shocking waste of money that was. It constrained a major infrastructure project, a railway line. But I'm not aware.
But I'm talking about what you're going to do in the future. So you're warning the tree huggers. It's all over now.
What we saw under the last government was the economy flatlining, but also nature in decline. We can do better. We can have a win-win for both. So what we're looking at is how we can allow the building to go ahead, but also help nature to recover. And the Nature Restoration Fund means the developers will fund the upgrades in nature.
But you're doing the same thing. You're going for you're saying there's going to be a balance. At the end, you have to choose. Is it growth or is it...
Well, the last government chose decline in both the economy and nature. I choose a win-win. We can have both. If we can get that money and we can recover nature across whole landscapes, we can allow the house building to go ahead elsewhere. It's a win-win, Trevor.
You used to call that Boris Johnson cakeism, but I just want... let's move on, because there's something I want to ask you about before we end. Prime Minister withdrew the whip from just 4 members of Parliament for what has been described as persistent rebellion. I won't use the phrase that's being knocking around. But there are others who have rebelled many more times than, for example, Rachel Maskell, and they haven't been punished. This looks a bit spiteful because she beat you on the welfare reform bill.
I wasn't involved in those particular decisions, but it is true to say we campaigned together as a Labour team. We won together as a Labour team, and we now
but politics is not all about winning. It's also about
we need to govern
principles.
together as a Labour team. Now, all of us from time to time are going to have things that we're concerned about or we want to discuss with colleagues. There are ways of going about that, and there are ways of not going about that. If you put yourself too far outside of the rest of the team, you're undermining the team, and you can't allow that to go on. As I understand it, these suspensions were not for any one particular issue. They were a pattern of behaviour. But I think it's the right signal to send that stray too far outside, you're letting the whole team down, and we can't allow that.
What does the Prime Minister really think? He said, after amending the welfare reform bill, that the bill now struck the right balance. These are his words.
Yeah.
Now, without Rachel Maskell's resistance to the proposals, he would never have changed those proposals. So why is she now being punished for helping him get to the right balance?
It's not about just one incident.
She's rebelled as far as we can make out once on this issue.
Nobody managing a team can let one player just go off and play to their own separate strategy. But the team will never win if you do that, Trevor.
She's not a serial rebel. And he says she helped him get to the right balance, and her reward is to have the whip withdrawn.
It's not about one incident. It is about the team. We campaigned as a team, we won as a team, we're going to govern as a team. If people think they're more important than the team, they need to think again.
OK, so who else is going to get spanked now? Well, because presumably there are several other MPs. There are other MPs who've done the same. In fact, by my reckoning, there are several other MPs who have rebelled many more times. I mean, you know the names. Why are these 4 being picked out?
It's really important that we all play the team game.
And my point is,
me included, will occasionally have concerns about something that is happening, and we'll go and speak to the relevant minister. That is the way to resolve your differences.
But why these
you can't be part of a government campaigning against
fairness? What about fairness?
I think it is fair.
Which your leader is constantly talking about.
I think it is fair that if you're part of a team, you should be required to play the team game. You can make your views known, but if you go too far outside, you're actually undermining the whole team.
Okay.
We can't allow that. We need to get these big changes through, the water reforms that I'm talking about. We're putting the wages are rising faster than for 10 years now. We want to deliver for the British people.
Just very quickly on this. Diane Abbott, she's never going to come back into the parliamentary party, is she?
Well, that will be in the hands of the people who are considering the facts.
Would you want to see her back?
Well, I'm very disappointed in Diane that, first of all, you know, she was initially suspended. She apologised for what she's done. She's come back in, and now she's repeated the things she said to start with. But it's out of my hands.
This is the end of her time as a Labour MP, it sounds like.
You know, I respect Diane. I've known Diane for many, many decades. I think it's a shame she did what she did.
Steve Reed, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.